Being multicultural means being a bridge between two worlds.
So I identify as half Chinese, half white.
I am Indian and I am American.
Pacific Islander and American, so API.
I was born in China, even though I never was really connected to my roots back there. I was raised in a Japanese-American household. Personally, I identify as Japanese-American.
My dad's family is from Mexico, and then my mom is half Korean.
My dad is Pacific Islander from Guam, and he is himself Chamorro and Filipino. My mother is primarily of Scottish descent, but she also has Cornish and German as well.
Indian and American, specifically North Indian and American. That actually does make a difference.
I guess I personally never see it as sort of a dominant identity. I personally identify as both white and Chinese, and I don't really think of one as more dominant than the other.
My dominant identity is pretty much like a mixture of identifying as Mexican and Korean, and then also American.
I mean, I guess there really isn't a dominant one. Maybe the American one, just because I consume more American media. I just switch between the circumstance.
More than halfway through my life, I was also brought in with a Filipino family. I have Filipino culture, and I have Japanese culture, and not so much Chinese culture.
For me, my racial identity is very contextual. For example, a lot of time I spent last year on Guam, of course centered around how much of self was Chamorro. Depending on what space I was in, my name, which is more known as Filipino on Guam, has a different connotation to it, which is very different than how I explain my heritage when I was visiting Scotland.
I don't really know if one necessarily dominates the other one. I really have to just find a really good balance between the two. I wouldn't be who I am without either one.
Literally the first time I met a white person.
Pretty much when you go to public schools, I think kids will start to ask questions.
Kind of toward middle school, where I went to a predominantly white school, everybody would ask me, what mix of cultures I was, because I look different than everybody.
They'll have these suppositions about what they think you are.
Then as I got older and became more aware of kind of the social injustices that happen to members of my communities that I associated with, then I could start to notice kind of some subtle differential treatment.
My first time bringing over a friend, and I didn't know how they react to my culture, and the setting they're in. Being from the native island of Chuuk, our culture, we like hospitality, and we treat our guests with a lot of respect. I was just conscious of what I was doing, oh, is this gonna bother them?
I phenotypically, mostly, especially with the change of sunlight exposure, it was pretty white passing, and with the exception of a few questions or inquiries, mostly benevolent that I've come across in regards to my heritage and my surname.
There are multiple places where this sort of thing occurs. Interacting with my family. My uncle once called one of my nieces banana. Yellow on the outside and white on the inside.
Growing up, because I was in a Japanese-American household, a lot of people just assumed I was Japanese-American, even though I'm not. I'm actually Chinese. I had a huge identity crisis, I guess I would say. I didn't know whether or not I had to fit this or fit this. Over time, I just kind of learned to really accept myself and be comfortable and in my own skin.
I remember I'd always want to go to sleepovers and things like that. My parents were very reluctant to let me do that because it wasn't how they grew up and it wasn't something they understood. And it was really hard for me to explain to my friends why I had the rules that I did in my house.
There's obviously a little bit of an impact. There are some topics that I don't really bring up around some of my Indian family, and there's some topics I don't really bring up around Americans, but not really for any particular reason. It's more or less just because they wouldn't understand the references.
There are a couple things I love. One, I love that I get to experience a lot of things.
I think my favorite part is just the fact that I have such a diversity of experiences.
It gives me access to a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different media.
It's defined my existence. I love it now. I didn't always love it. Growing up, it was very confusing and frustrating. It's okay to be more than one thing. Our society conditions us as pieces of it to be kind of monolithic individuals when it comes to how you identify.
I'm better at approaching people, I think I would say, just because I have that familiarity of just different cultures and backgrounds.
Diversity.
Being multiracial just means being a person. At the end of the day, we're all people.
Being able to think on your toes and be open-minded and be, as they say, cognitively flexible, psych term.
To be multiracial means balance. The many things that make up our identities, we're more than the sum of our parts. Everybody has their own journey, but everybody's personality, individual personality is a really beautiful thing, but it's a very difficult thing to discover as well, particularly so for multiracial individuals.
Being multicultural means loving every part of yourself and accepting who you are.